thanks for skipping Veep and coming out to what will be a much more exciting presentation. So I'm Paul Grassi. I work for the National Institute of Standards and Technology in Washington, D.C., NIST, part of the Department of Commerce. I work in our Trusted Identities group. Believe it or not, we actually don't write a whole heck of a lot of standards. We actually look to fund the market. We look for the market to innovate. We look to the market and the private sector to set standards that we can then turn around and apply in the government. So we actually write very few, at least in the cybersecurity division that I'm in. Really happy to be here with Greg and Marina and Blake, talk about veteran identity. I'll let them introduce themselves really quick. But before I do, I'm really excited that we've got the VA here to present. We've been trying to get identity right in the government for about 20 years. My predecessor always had Lucy in the football. That's what we've seen to our citizens and the business owners that desperately need to reach citizens in a meaningful way. And that meaningful way just sometimes requires a strong identity background to be part of those service providers. So we've taken a long time, and I'm very pleased that the VA actually is the leader in government in delivering huge benefits to the citizens, to the veteran population, based on what ID.me has been able to do with their identity platform. So without further ado, why don't we do some introductions first? Greg?
My name is Greg Gershman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ad Hoc LLC. We're a small software development company. We work with government agencies on building out digital services. For this particular project, we are the prime contractor on the SXSW technical implementation contract with the VA. So we're a team of software engineers, designers, user researchers, project managers, product developers, working with VA's digital services team to bring vets.gov basically. I'll let Marina talk a little bit more about vets.gov, but build vets.gov and roll that stuff out. And we work very closely with ID.me to integrate their stuff into VA so that the veterans can use it and get the benefits of that service.
Hi, I'm Marina Martin. I was the Chief Technology Officer of the Department of Veterans Affairs until 6 weeks ago. I joined the VA in 2013, and I worked on a few projects. I helped establish the first agency digital service team at the VA, which is now about 90 strong. And we had a couple of main initiatives around skills modernization, and then what we're going to talk about today, which is vets.gov.
Blake Hall, I'm the founder and CEO of ID.me, third generation soldier. In a former life, I was an Army infantry officer, Ranger qualified, all that good stuff, hunting high value targets in Iraq. Went to Harvard Business School and became passionate about supporting the military veteran community to get access to benefits online. I saw that when businesses and government agencies weren't able to verify someone's identity and that they were a veteran online, really inefficient things happen, like veterans had to show up in person at VA facilities or to nonprofits to get access to benefits. So not having any technical experience or business experience, and the people shooting at me, I think briefly I was the only homeless Harvard Business School graduate in the country when I was sleeping on my rugby friend's couch back in 2010. But we just closed the $19 million Series B last week, so we figured it out.
Congrats. So VA, one of the biggest healthcare providers in the nation, benefits, insurance, education, an amazing business, not a simple problem or a simple environment to work within. What was it you guys were trying to solve, Marina?
So when I came to the VA in 2013, I noticed that VA had literally over 1,000 websites for veterans, and we actually had 3 separate registries to keep track of the websites that we had, none of which had the same number. And I tried to go through it from an end user experience for my grandfather. So I wanted my Papu to have a VA benefits as he was actually dying, and I was unable to get him through the process or get him an account as the Chief Technology Officer, and that was extremely alarming to me. So I, spent time with users and veterans to say, instead of having all this fragmented experience, which makes tons of sense inside the VA, right? This business line has a website and a login. This business line has a website and a login. We need to change the way we're working for the veterans. They have one place to go where they can get all the information and services that they need as quickly and efficiently as possible. So that was sort of the mission with vets.gov, and a core part of that was identity. Not only is it inconvenient to have 12 different logins for a veteran, but also we wanted to be clear on protecting veterans and their identity and their security. And if you have to do that in 12 different places, that becomes extremely unwieldy. And many of the logins that we had were hard to use, they weren't meeting this different NIST standards, and in many cases actually veterans couldn't even get them, which was its own challenge, because it's hard to see the veterans that couldn't get in the door in the first place. So we really wanted to fix that problem.
And then, given the fact that you've got multiple stovepipes, DoD poking around from time to time, and OMB, how were you able to kind of herd all those cats?
So VA is not only the largest integrated healthcare system in America, but we're also the largest civilian agency. So we have 330,000 employees, not counting all the hundreds of thousands of contractors that we have. And just our IT budget was over $4 billion annually. So it was really, really hard to kind of line everything up. There were a couple of keys that I would have as advice. One of them is understanding people's risk framework. So if you have a particular business line, the easiest and most effective way to accomplish your objectives is to create your own website with your own login, because you have all those things inside your control. It's much riskier to give that up to another group or to join up with others, because they might not get it done, right? And it's easier to keep it in your line. But that's actually not what's best for the veteran. So one of the most impactful things that we did at VA is literally put the lens on the veteran. One amazing story we had was we went to the President's Office of Correspondence, and we found a letter from a homeless veteran that was trying to get health care, asking the President to please help him. And we went and we sat with him, literally like on the sidewalk, and videotaped him showing us how he tried to get health care. He tried 11 times, and failed, and this is the thing you should only have to do once in his life. And he didn't believe that he just wasn't eligible and he was going to give up, but he was eligible. He had tried 11 times with us, and we had failed him 11 times. So once people started seeing that video of him, he's super tech savvy, he's funny, he's smart, unable to make it through, that was what kind of transformed and blew open the door that said, hey, we need to fix this for Dominic and the Dominics out there, and change our risk framework a little bit.
It's interesting that it's risky to hold all that information and to do everything yourself, but when we, the government, think we can do things the best, we end up failing our stakeholders. So I'm glad that you were able to pull Greg and Blake in. So transitioning a little bit, Greg, you're a part of healthcare.gov turnaround. If folks here are aware of that, that was the Obamacare site that didn't have the best starts.
Launched in not go very well.
What were you able to pull in, at least lessons learned, and apply here with the VA and Marina?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I, Paul Smith, if you've heard the stories that they sent like 5 people in to go fix healthcare.gov, that was me and Paul and a couple other people. So we went in and worked with the contractors that the government had procured to build the healthcare.gov website. It was a company that really didn't have a tremendous amount of experience building consumer-facing web applications. A lot of experience in enterprise applications, but building something like healthcare.gov, which was going to have challenges in terms of user experience and design, of communicating this very complex process to people who never shopped for healthcare before. That was something that was a little outside, I think, their core skill set. And then also, building an application that scales towards the web was something, that was just wrong choice of technologies, wrong choice of implementation. So that was, I think, a really big, when we came out of that, when we founded Ad Hoc, a few months after, working 17 hours a day to, get the website off CNN, we felt like if we bring the kind of people that would typically work in a startup, familiar with the common tools and processes that you use when you're building these kinds of websites, that's really going to be transformational for government. It's going to, enable all sorts of new kinds of things. People who think about problems in terms of what are the SaaS products out there that I can use, and integrate that are going to, that are going to solve problems, as opposed to like, let's, build an enterprise, architecture, infrastructure that's, that's going to tackle all of this. So I think those were a lot of the lessons that we learned from healthcare.gov. just bringing the right kind of people to the problem. And I think that's proven so far to be really instrumental in the success we've had with vets.gov.
And it's still online.
With healthcare.gov? For now.
That's not good.
Oh, vets.gov, yeah.
So I want to ask Marina this point I think you probably can pile on, and you've touched on this. Why was identity so important to you and to the merging of these almost 3 or 4 or 5 brands into one? And then maybe like the part 2's for you is why is the varying levels of identity assurance valuable, and why in some cases would you want to have low, and in some cases want to have high?
So clearly, a big focus at the VA is protecting veterans' privacy and security, but you have to balance that with veterans' ability to literally access your service. So oftentimes the chorus was, it's not secure, it has to be more secure, and in government you tend to measure security by amounts of paperwork filled out, as opposed to actual security that we may measure in a different manner. So it was really, really, really important to me and to our team and to our end users that we found an identity solution that was easy for veterans to use, but also fully met and ideally way surpassed the security opportunities of our previous use cases. So one of the first things that we did, after partnering with ID.me was we had all of our senior officials actually try to log on to the account, and we kept working on that user experience. And these guys were amazing partners at iterating on the spot. So, with Secretary Bob, if he got stuck somewhere, we fixed that, and then we went out to hundreds of veterans to have them try it, because it was really important to find that balance, which is a hard line of security and privacy, with also usability and access.
Yeah, so I think, just to point out what Marina did, because she went right over it, to win the trust of all the different business owners within VA, and to actually make the VA about veterans, it seems very simple to everyone here on the outside looking in, but to cross that gap where they had to give up control, and they had actually incentives to keep things within their own silo, it took an enormous amount of interpersonal skills and hustle. So I'm just very appreciative to have an opportunity and to have a partner within government and work with Greg and Paul, because it's really about the citizens. It's about that end person and not the bureaucracy of the organization that you're serving. And so when it comes to identity, identity is really about establishing trust for a given transaction. And so another way of saying that is that it's about mitigating risk for a particular transaction. If a veteran just wants to go in and save information about their, the GI Bill or something like that, that's not a very risky transaction. They can have a very basic account, NIST to set standards without getting into the jargon. It's basically low, medium, high. And so you just need a low login, because if somebody compromised that login, they're going to see what articles you saved. It's not kind of a big deal. But if you're going to mess it with your healthcare provider, or if there's prescription information, things like that, then obviously the risk of that transaction is a lot higher to someone's privacy if that information gets breached. And fortunately, the end user is actually a lot more motivated to take additional steps to prove their identity online, because that action is more valuable than maybe browsing through informational content. So what we've done is we basically built a platform that an application owner can go in. It's aligned to the federal standards that NIST, which is an agency of the Department of Commerce, has set up. We're one of 4 companies that are accredited. The other ones are Verizon, Symantec, and Athena Health. So they've done a really good job incubating an ecosystem of identity providers. And basically, given the risk of the action, they tailor the level of identity verification and authentication that needs to be applied. And really why that matters is it translates into a good user experience. You shouldn't have to upload an image of your driver's license to save basic content, but you should absolutely do that when you're doing a riskier thing.
A lot of our most recent material is very influenced by what you guys are doing at the VA, and then also what ID.me is doing out in the market. Prior to this, I think in the government we would either default to the lowest level of assurance because we don't know how to do risk management very well, or we would over-collect, and over-collecting is even worse, which is maybe a good segue into how you guys got started, because I know it's founded on that premise of not giving away more than you have to actually execute a transaction online.
Yeah, so So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to give people agency. We wanted to give them control over their own personal data. But where do you start? I mean, it's just such a massive problem, proving who you are on the internet. It's one of the most fundamental issues that we've all had to deal with. When the internet started, there was a bunch of academic researchers, and they said, we'll just use a password for access. And they kind of forgot that this thing would become a lot larger, and that banking and healthcare and everything else would eventually come onto it. So everyone's struggling and retrofitting and working within their own silos to try to figure it out. And that's created kind of an awful experience for users because we're all managing over 100 different logins. And so there's a tremendous amount of risk. If you look at how Russia hacked the election, they hacked John Podesta's login. They got his password. They didn't hack Google. They got him to give up his login. So he should have had stronger authentication. If he had ID.me, it would be public. So when we started, I thought about, what's the utility of my military ID card? How can I use this? And my military ID card could let me do a lot of things. I could board an airplane with it. I could open up a bank account with it. I could prove ownership of a payment card, a credit card. I could go into Home Depot and get 10% off a transaction. And so it's something you kind of take for granted, the utility of your driver's license or of a military ID card. But I was like, well, how is that credential used across different verticals, and how can we create a digital network that replicated that same utility? So we actually went a pilot with the VA's Innovation Center, with Under Armour, and with, I think, Telluride Ski Resort back in 2012. And we noticed that all these entities weren't offering, in the case of the retailers, subsidized price points online. And as I talked to the marketing teams, they said, we would love to offer these online, but right now we can only offer it in our brick and mortar channels because we have no way of verifying if somebody on our website is in fact a service member or a veteran. And they go, and by the way, this isn't unique to the military, it's true for students, it's true for teachers. If we're going to give a subsidized price point, we can't trust the other person if they just tick a box and say, I'm a student or I'm a veteran. So we said, well, what if we built a service that had real-time connectivity to authoritative data sources where we could verify that somebody was a veteran. And an important part of preventing fraud for the partners was making sure that we could determine uniqueness. So we very quickly realized, oh no, the DoD has collected social security numbers and has used that as the identifier for the military population. And so as a third generation soldier, everyone in my family served, if we were going to be collecting a partial or full socials ourselves, we wanted to be certified against the most rigorous federal standards to be audited so that we could actually be stewards and custodians of that data. So the way our process works, it's a lot like PayPal. We go in, we collect name, date of birth, a unique identifier for that group. But the only data that the end user is asked to share with, in this case, like Under Armour, now Ford, or the NFL shop, is just their name and their group affiliation. So I'm Blake, I'm a veteran. Because retailers have no interest in your social security number. Just like, when you open up a bank account, you use your name, your social, and everything else, and they give you a credit card. Well, Starbucks doesn't want your social, right? That's the bank's job to be a good custodian of that. The bank gives you a credential that you can use to very easily complete a transaction. So we've grown very quickly. We're about 3.5 million users now. We have, I think, something like 6,000 to 7,000 service members and veterans that sign up for our site every day. And we don't spend anything on consumer marketing. Give me chills a little bit. And now that same credential can also be portable over to the VA. And that's exactly how my DoD issued CAT card worked. When I wanted to get on base, you better believe the authentication was a lot more rigorous when that gate guard grabbed it for me, looked at my picture, looked at me. But if I'm at Home Depot with the cashier, she's kind of just glancing at it, it's right back in my wallet. So we really tiered, again, the level of verification to the risk of the transaction. So you can get away with a much easier login process at a retailer than you can with the VA, of course, because the risk profile is different. And yeah, I think it was definitely learning. It was a 6-year kind of journey to figure all that stuff out, but I think we got it now.
Identity is actually kind of hard. One thing that resonates with me from your stories and how you guys started is, in the analog world, the veteran wants a 10% discount. He has to tell the merchant what his blood type is. And now online, in this day and age where we're hearing that there's no such thing as online privacy, we actually are getting it because that blood type isn't even in your system.
That's right. Yeah, we saw like the Outback was encouraging veterans on Veterans Day to bring their Form DD-214, their separation paperwork, which has your name, your social, your address history, like every single award you won in the military, your blood type. So literally, veterans on Veterans Day were showing this to waiters and waitresses to get a free blooming onion. And that to me was just crazy, right? You have to fix that. So we're like, look, let's build a really good platform. We'll protect that data. You know, to get your blooming onion, they can trust, you know, us as a third party to vouch for them without veterans showing a stranger, you know, their social be a fried onion.
So you mentioned attributes. It's a little bit more here than just a secure login. You're collecting attributes, you're sharing attributes, and is the notion of legal identity something that you guys are wrestling with? And from a VA's perspective, you know, when I start looking at collection of attributes, two-parter, I think, for the Lake Arena, you know, does the VA have a motivation to be privacy enhancing, or is it just assumed since you're the VA, you have all this information anyways, let's just keep collecting it?
So when it comes to legal identity is just a bundle of attributes. It's your name, it's your date of birth, it's your social security number. So it's sort of like your driver's license plus maybe your social security card when it comes to interacting with government agencies. And so our login, after we administer the identity verification process, essentially issues a federally certified legal form of identification in the form of a single sign-on. And it can be used not only at the VA, but across government websites. We have 6 different federal agencies that are interacting with us. So once you establish your identity at the VA, or at the IRS is also integrating, or at NASA, or the state of Maine, you can then have one login that is useful for proving your legal identity online. But then there's this notion of other attributes that are important for access decisions. Obviously, the VA has physicians and patients, and physicians are going to have much different privileges within an application than patients are. So one of the cool things that we do as a platform is once we verify that you are who you're claiming to be in terms of your identity as a citizen, we can then send those attributes to the NPI index, the National Provider Index, which is the database of healthcare providers in the United States, nurse practitioners, PAs, physicians, and we can actually get back, is this identity also a physician? What's their subspecialty? Is it otolaryngology? Is it oncology? What states are they licensed in? And then we can basically send that data over to the VA's application, and they can make the appropriate access decisions. So maybe physicians are actually issuing prescriptions, whereas patients are just refilling them. And so that really helps a lot of these like paper-based processes that Marina, you know, I'm sure has a few examples I know from conversations that, you know, we can do this in 300 milliseconds, and you can have a deterministic audit trail to the authoritative source. And so when you're talking about access and actually preventing payments fraud and everything else, it's really good to be able to directly ping an authoritative database with a legal identity that's been authenticated, you know, the highest standards that NIST is set. So.
I think using attributes in this way is still fairly new to government, and I'm actually really excited about where VA can take it in the coming years. One use case is probably with our disability claims backlog. You guys probably saw it in the news. There were literally offices buckling under the weight of these disability claims. And one of my projects at VA was really to move that towards a completely online interactive process, removing a lot of the paper, also eliminating the buckling offices. But an attribute there, if you have your private physician that wants to fill out all the information necessary for your disability claim, if we can use ID.me and it confirms that you're a physician, that actually reduces the timeline of the process by potentially 60 or 90 days. Because I get an instant trusted verification versus sort of an auditing or another manual or in-long process. So I think that the more that we use attributes, the more we'll also be able to use things like powers of attorney and make sure that they have access to certain parts of vets.gov that they're entitled to, or maybe a spouse, or someone that's legally allowed to cover a veteran's financial gains. And the more that we do that securely, the less likely we are to have fraud, which is much easier in those regards on paper. We actually, one of the interesting things I find at VAs, we have a real problem with ex-spouses reporting their spouse as dead when they are still alive, to the point that we actually have a special hotline to handle reporting that you're still alive. That shouldn't, you know,
What's the incentive to do that? What do they get?
it just screws with your life, because it takes a long time for the VA to undead you. We have so many different systems. I know this sounds like a ridiculous cause great pain to somebody, and it's incredibly pain to veterans, that's horrible. So in a case like this, if I have a better ability to protect against those things in the first place, hopefully we won't need the undead hotline.
Yeah, so ID.me owns and not creeping way, owns the identity. You leverage it in a transient way only when you need it at transaction time, which from a risk perspective puts you in a much better position because you no longer have this PII. There won't be a front page post article about VA loses, all this identity data. We've spread that risk out to the IDEs of the world and the credentials providers they're integrated with.
And Greg has actually done a ton of work internally with the VAs, like attributes that are only specific to the VA. I don't know if you want to talk about the things that you're doing with FBI for different applications, but.
Yeah, sure. So, we rely on ID.me for the legal identity, so we can, name, date of birth, social security number. With that, we can then use infrastructure that VA has to correlate that legal identity across a whole different set of systems. So, it's really just a simple, we get a thing that says this is Blake Hall, and we can go and see this backend system, this is Blake's user ID is 12345, and this other system that's 67810, and it lets those systems just contain the information that they need. And then from our perspective, we're creating this umbrella, sort of application that sits on top of all these different, siloed applications that have been built by various different business units. So that lets us, take an approach which is really focused on the veteran, their needs in that particular, whatever transaction use case they're being presented with. We can, build that in a single context and a single user experience and get access to everything underneath that we need. So it's really helpful and really powerful.
Right, and it's things like disability rating, I think, too. That the VA is authoritative for that. Nobody outside of the VA really needs that except for the VA. So you have strong partitioning of the data too, where a lot of the work that Greg is doing is really important.
Keep the data where it needs to be.
Yep.
Keep people responsible for it, and then just build the connections between them. And give the user control over who gets access to it.
Yeah, this also makes things more secure because the way the government historically works is every line of business has its own system that resaves all of your information. And this has kind of two problems. One is you have many, many more attack vectors because somebody just needs to hit one of those 85 systems to land us on the front page. And it may have a lot of information because they're pulling information from other systems and then extra saving in here. And the second issue with that is when you update your address in one system, it doesn't get updated in the other 84, and that causes tremendous downstream problems.
What's really interesting about that is from the change management perspective, looking at VA as an organization, right? So this is, how long has IT systems, the enterprise architecture been being built at VA? 20 something? Since the 60s, yeah, right. So what's really interesting to see how, we're literally from a technology perspective, we're building a JavaScript application that's a bunch of forms and, interfaces. There's an API that we build a RESTful API to get information and we interface with all these backend systems. So from a technology perspective, that's pretty straightforward, right? It's not super rocket science. The challenges lie in integrating with the backend systems and accounting for various different kinds of uptime and reliability and things like that. And then the design and getting the design right. But what's really cool to see is you have this organization for 40 years has been, building in silos and duplicating data, and now we're just starting to get to the point after, almost a year of doing this, we're starting to see the enterprise shift around not the bureaucracy's needs, but around the user's needs, and really reorient their system and prioritize, within these individual business units, okay, what are the things that veterans need from us, and what can we do to enable and empower, them to get access to that stuff, which is really, really interesting from a digital, transformation type of perspective, and how we're just building a website, right? But it is this lever for change, which is really cool.
So as a prime, you have the job of shouldering the load of this thing being successful from a metrics and measuring success perspective. What are you capturing and reporting to Marina or her successor? And then on the flip side, what are you telling the veteran about the system so that they feel comfortable that they're actually going to a safe place online?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the big metrics that we like to keep track of and constantly tweak and improve is the number of the percentage of users that get through the sign up process, which is really, that's my favorite part of the day. You know, every morning I get the email and I get to see that, which is really cool because it is much higher than I don't want to give those numbers out because it's not my company, but they're very good numbers for what we're trying to do, and it's really exciting. We're really focused on, again, like, you know, it's kind of a staged approach, like a strategic approach to how we're migrating things over. So we're looking at like, what are the key transactions that the veterans use, you know, what has the most impact, and migrating those over, you know, and so working with VA to understand like what percentage of that is moved over on a, you know, on a weekly or monthly basis. You know, on the application level, we're just, you know, it's very different for everything. We're just tracking like completion rates on, you know, forms. We track error rates on the back end, so we see like, you know, is there something in terms of like our connections to the back end systems that's not working, things like that. But yeah, I mean, generally, all the kinds of things you would track in like a transactional system.
Yeah, I've seen some of the numbers and it's impressive because you typically hear that at the highest levels it's too hard. Well, it's supposed to be, because we want to make sure it's you, but it's too hard and we're not getting people through, so we can't do it at that level, so we're going to do it down a level. You guys are proving that's not necessarily the case.
There's a big fear, there always has been a big fear that like, oh, we're going to do this and like this percentage of veterans aren't going to have access to it. And I mean, that is a concern, but you know, I think one of the things that VA has done, which has been really, I think enabling, is to take an incremental approach to it and like understand that we're going to like chop off this like big portion of users, we're going to serve them first, and then we're going to incrementally improve and get to a point where, you know, the solution is not always going to be, right, that for all the different veterans, some don't have cell phones, some don't have internet access, right? So there's other solutions that need to be put in place, and we'll get there, but it's having the freedom and having people in VA that understand that, which is Marina's team, the digital services team, which is, you know, it sounds pretty straightforward, but it's actually very not incredibly common across government that you know, you'll take that kind of iterative approach and be willing to, you know, improve things incrementally.
Building on the success metrics, something that I really envision for VA is how it can be effortless to interact with VA, and this is really, frankly, Trojan horse kind of to get us there, when we have identity, verified identity, and the right attributes, and then this API layer that Greg is talking about. So play one is, we have vets.gov, we have application forms for all the different benefit lines we have, and they're connecting to all those back-end legacy systems. So now we've connected the universe. Now we're in a place, you know, once we finish that a veteran could say update their address, and it would update in one place, and it could go out to all other systems. But really the next vision from there is, now I know, trusted that Blake, or John Doe is a veteran and he has a service disability rating of 60%. I can